WIC. And joining us now, we have, I've talked to the Lieutenant Colonel a couple of times here, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Cross. He's a pilot with the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron. He is not a crazy man. He is a brave individual, and I really want to go on a plane ride with him, and we're going to work that out eventually.
You're sucking up.
No, I really do want to go. We've had this conversation.
I know, and you're sucking up. I didn't mean to call him a crazy man if I'd known you were sucking up.
This is the worst intro in radio history. You realize that, right? We have now achieved that. It just keeps going down. Colonel Cross, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. Good morning. Good to see you guys. Good to talk to you again, Dave.
Well, this is your busy season, right?
It is. It's, it was kind of quiet last month or so, and then all of a sudden in the last couple of weeks, it's really picked up. We've been pretty busy, obviously, with Tropical Storm Fred, and now we're dealing with Tropical Storm Grace, which is forecasted to turn into a hurricane probably overnight into tomorrow and cut across the Yucatan Peninsula and make landfall down in southern Mexico.
And that doesn't really present much of a problem for us, especially short term, but you guys still are making the flights and still collecting the data on it, right?
Right. So the operation continues 24/7 when there's a storm that's going to make landfall. So we've actually we forward deployed. We were going to go to St. Croix, but with COVID restrictions and things like that we had going on this year, and also the track of the storm, Fred and Grace going over the islands, Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, we decided to pull back to a different location. So we're actually operating out of Homestead Air Reserve Station, which is in Miami, Florida, which was ground zero for, which one was that? The big hurricane back in 92. Anyway, so
Andrew,
they're operating from there. We got 3 aircraft. We've got about 65 people with, parts and planes and everything we need to keep that operation sustained for 24/7 going around the clock. So they flew Fred. Once it got to around Cuba, then we started picking it up and flying it from home station. I actually flew Tropical Storm Fred twice, pretty much back to back on a Friday and then Sunday morning. When I flew it on Friday, it was just the eye was actually over Cuba. So we didn't think we'd be out there very long. We were only flying inside the environment on the north side there for about 2.5 hours. And then the next time when I flew it, was in the central Gulf of Mexico, working towards the Florida Panhandle. It was still a pretty good tropical storm there, but a lot of convection off to the northeast. We flew it inside the environment for about 5 hours, which is pretty typical when you're tracking a storm. You stay in the environment itself for about 5 hours. But they'll continue to fly it out of Homestead Air Reserve Base. And that was Hurricane Andrew. Just came to me. I'm over 50 now, so sometimes I forget things. But that was Hurricane Andrew that hit ground zero there in 92 and then worked its way into Louisiana. But they'll continue to fly it probably till tomorrow out of southern Florida, and then we'll start picking it up here out of Keesler down here in Biloxi, Mississippi, and we'll take it all the way till it makes landfall in Mexico.
Now, Fred went through a period where it really wasn't anything. They knew it was going to build back up, but it was just a large area of instability. At what point, what do they go by to say, well, no, it's developed again? It's been close for a while, but it's developed again. Is it literally just an eyeball guess? You fly in and go, yep, looks like a tropical storm again now. What are the measurements that you take to make that determination?
So, yeah, that's a great point. So Fred was just like a remnant low there for a while. It was a TS and dropped off to a remnant low. But like I said, when we were flying it, we were tracking this thing, and the eye was well over Cuba. We were just off the beach there on the north side of Cuba. And there really wasn't much we could measure as far as the center of circulation. So we kind of have to wait and hang out. And that's what the forecasters and the scientists are looking for. They want to see where that closed circulation is so you can pinpoint that lowest dot of pressure. So once it gets back out over open water, the scientists know that the Gulf has all the ingredients it needs to for a storm to develop. It's got warm water, and there's plenty of websites where you can look at sea surface temperatures and things like that. So you go in there and they look at all of that stuff, and then they're looking at, what's going on in the environment itself, what's going to affect Fred to see if it has everything it needs to blow up into a massive hurricane or a tropical storm or something like that. So these guys are really sharp. They're the best in the business, best in the world. They know what they're doing. They've been doing it a long time. And our job is just to fly the plane and extract the data from the low pressure area and give it to those guys real time so that they can make an accurate forecast. But look, they tell us to stay with it. They know what they're looking at way better than I do. I'm just a glorified bus driver. But those guys down in Miami, they know exactly what they're doing. And I tell you what, my hat goes off to them because they nail it just about every time.
Colonel, that's one heck of a bus. Let me just say that.
It's got a lot of power. It's a very powerful plane.
And that brings up another question to my mind. And I have noticed, because professionally with what I do, I've been very interested in the tracking of hurricanes and professionally had to report on it for decades now. And I have noticed we have gotten a lot more accurate with this. We have developed a much bigger track record and better track record of knowing where these things are going to go and how they're going to develop accurately. Is that because of a change of the equipment that you have on the plane, or is that a more of a change back at home base where they're doing the calculations?
Well, that's a great question. That's a tough one too. We do have we've had some upgrades to the equipment on the plane. And that's more or less just to keep up with the technology of how data is transferred and things like that. Because, I mean, as you well know, I mean, the technology, it's very difficult to keep up with anything, whether it's your cell phone or a home video system or anything like that. So that stuff is always changing. So it's a constant battle to keep up with that. But, one of the biggest things is we've been doing this for so long. It's sort of like the law of averages. We've collected so much data over the years in these storms. These forecast models are just getting tighter and tighter and tighter the more data that we collect. Like if you go on the National Hurricane Center website right now, I was just looking at it before we clicked on. If you look at Grace at the track, all of the models line up, and this storm is still quite a few days away from it making landfall. It's going to cut across the Yucatan Peninsula, so it's going to deal with a little bit of shear right there. It's probably going to drop off its intensity and then blow back up once it gets over to warm water. But if you look at those model runs, I mean, it's just a string of lines going across the Yucatan there. They're all lined up. There's just one model, I think, that takes it back up into the Gulf. So when
there's
they're that
always
tight,
one. Yeah,
there's always one. Somebody's trying to make a name for themselves somewhere, I'm sure. But when they're that tight, you can pretty much go with it. It's going to be in that general area.
And that is really miraculous when you think about, yesterday was the anniversary of Camille making landfall on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And I was seeing various things people were pointing out. One of the things that they pointed out, that within 12 hours of it making landfall, the predictions at that point were that it wasn't going to hit Mississippi. It was going somewhere else. It was going over to the Florida Panhandle. And then all of a sudden, oops, we missed that one. We don't really see that kind of mistake anymore. We know where they're going now, and we know where they're going to make landfall, and we have a pretty good idea of what size storm it's going to be when it does. So that's within, my lifetime that we have had that much of a change in the predictive ability on these things, and it really is amazing when you stop and think about it.
Yeah, Dave, that's a great point. It really is incredible that, the name hurricane hunters was derived decades ago because they used to go out and fly these large open tracks over water, and they would hunt these things. Now we have beautiful things like satellite imagery and all that. We can go right to the center of the eye. We don't have to go hunting it. We just fly right to it. And, look, it's Mother Nature. She's still very unpredictable. You never know when she's going to throw a curveball. And the tracks all line up for Grace to cut right across the Yucatan, and you never know, that one model could be the one. So like I tell people all the time, if you live anywhere around the Gulf of Mexico, it's kind of like that pinball machine. Once that ball gets in between the bumpers, it's going to hit something, and it's not going to escape the Gulf of Mexico. So you just really can't drop your guard. You have to always be ready. I went in the store the other day to get a case of water just because I needed some water. I was cutting grass. And at this time of year, I hate going in the store in uniform, but I had to do it. And man, I'm telling you, I was like mobbed. Everybody, what's the storm going to do? What's it going to do? And then when they see me grabbing a case of water, everybody goes into panic mode. So it's kind of funny, but it's the way it is when you live down here on the Gulf Coast. I mean, Katrina was the benchmark. You can't get it out of your mind. And once it gets in the Gulf, people really start getting on edge. And I still do today. I take this stuff very, very seriously. My parents live in the Florida Panhandle. I keep them advised all the time. And, it's a lot to deal with it, but I can't live anywhere else. The Gulf Coast is a great place to be.
Can you see him and Cantori showing up at the same place?
Oh, yeah. If they both pull in the parking lot, it's over. The bottled water is gone at that point.
Plywood, I'm still trying to hook up with Jim. I know him well.
Yeah, just when there's a storm on the way, don't put on your uniform and go meet Jim at the grocery store. You're going to cause a panic.
Exactly.
It's going to be a problem.
Exactly.
Colonel Sean Cross, can you hang on through the break?
Yeah, sure. I'll be here.
Fantastic. We'll continue talking with. Welcome back to the Gallo Show. Using summer wind to play in, Lieutenant Colonel Sean Cross.
I like it.
With the 53rd
like
Weather
it.
Reconnaissance Squadron. We're talking to the Colonel, and I have another question because we just dealt with Fred. We've got Grace that we're talking about that looks like it's going to just cut across the Gulf.
Yeah, right.
Then be quiet, be positive over there. And then we have up in the Atlantic, it's hard to keep things between the lines some days.
I've been doing this almost as long as the Colonel. And I don't believe it's going to go straight and do anything. I just think it's going to get there and go, I don't want to go to Mexico. How about Biloxi?
Well, you can't even completely trust them once they make landfall. Which one was it that made like 3 landfalls along the Gulf Coast over the space of 2 days? It would go in and then back out. And then
That would be Katrina.
Well, there was another one, though. It wasn't just Katrina. It was another one.
There's been quite a few storms over the years that just won't go away. You know, it's like the rash that you just can't get rid of or whatever. It just goes. It went in Florida Panhandle, went out over the eastern seaboard, went back out over the Atlantic, made a right turn, came back into the eastern side of Florida. So, look, Mother Nature's very unpredictable at times. She has her own unique personality with these storms, and you just never know. And that's what I tell these new crew members that I'm flying with. Like, look, I had a brand new co-pilot on board the other night. We were flying all night long in Fred, and I'm like, look, the big thing here is you just cannot drop your guard. You can fly along for 2 or 3 hours and never feel a bump, and then all of a sudden, you know, this thing starts going through some type of rapid intensification, and then you can really get knocked around pretty strong in a storm. You know, Hurricane Michael is my latest benchmark in 2018. Dave, you've heard me talk about it before. That sucker, man, he never lost strength. I mean, he just gained power every inch across the Gulf of Mexico until he made landfall in the Panama City area and then started to slowly burn himself out. So you just never know what's going to happen inside these storms.
And you flew into that
cautions. If you're on the ground, I did.
And
yeah, that was a very interesting flight.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was like riding a turbo elevator at times.
It was. We got beat up pretty bad there on the last run in, and when we broke into the eye, you know, I could see the beach right there off of Tyndall Air Force Base, and I could see the storm surge just rolling in and just wiping out pine trees and things like that. It was crazy. It was from 10,000 feet, but you could see plenty from there and what it looked like. The Gulf of Mexico and that part of the area there it's normally, you know, blue, green. The water's absolutely beautiful. But that day, that area of the Gulf is still pretty shallow just offshore there for 10, 20, 30 miles. And it was just churned up. It actually looked like the Mississippi River. It was so dark because she was just churning and just pulling everything from down below and bringing it up to the surface. It was pretty interesting to see it.
Man, now we've got Grace, but we also have up in the Atlantic, Henri, I believe is the way Henry is pronounced now, Henri, up around the Bermuda area.
Henry.
Well, it's spelled that way.
No, it's not.
Sort of. So that storm is up there. Do you guys fly into those storms up in the Atlantic as well, or does that come from a different place?
No, we do. And while you're talking about that, I'm bringing it up on the other page here. I'm just taking another quick look at it. So Henri, as you call it. So my very first storm flight back in 2001 was Hurricane Aaron, and it was September 9th, 2001, and we took off out of Keesler Air Force Base, flew all the way to Bermuda. We loitered in the storm area environment for about 6 hours, and then we recovered down in St. Croix and the Virgin Islands to fly another storm that was coming. So Bermuda is still an area of interest. If it's going to be a factor for possible landfall there, any type of threat, we do fly it. Those are some really, really long missions when you take off out of Keesler, because it's a long way to get there. And then usually, depending on how far north it is, we may have to recover somewhere on the eastern coast, maybe North Carolina or Georgia or somewhere like that, because we just don't have the endurance to make it back to Keesler. So the crew will stop there, spend the night, refuel, and then come home the next day.
Yeah, because I would think from Keesler to Bermuda, that's what, a good 8 hours, I would think, just to get there?
It's not quite that long, but it's a good ways away. And when you start talking about 12 and a half hours of flight time is all we have, maybe you can squeak out 13 and you start burning 4.5 hours to get somewhere, you're really cutting into your time as far as the reconnaissance of the storm environment itself. So that's why we chop off the backside and we land somewhere on the eastern seaboard to kind of give ourselves a 2-hour pad there to stay out longer, which is what's really important, because that's our job, is to stay in the storm environment.
What's the farthest out that you have flown? Because we see these storms come off of the Cape Verde Islands and form off the coast of Africa. I know you don't go that far, obviously, but what's the limit? How far out do you go on these reconnaissance missions?
So we start flying these storms when they hit about 52.5 degrees west of 53, which is east of the Virgin Islands, the Antilles, way out there. That gives us about a 3.5-hour flight from St. Croix to get to the environment, and then we'll start tracking it as it comes closer. But it used to be around 55 degrees. They've actually started the request for us to start flying them a little bit earlier now. So 52.5, 53 is where we pick them up. It's still a pretty good haul from St. Croix to get down there and fly around for 4 or 5 hours and then head back. You're looking at 12-hour missions when you're doing that.
We have a question on the C Spire text line. Mike in Brookhaven wants to know, what aircraft do you fly?
Good question. It's the C-130J Hercules. It's the newest variant of the C-130 that's been flying around forever. It's an all-glass cockpit. It's all digital screens and things like that, so there's no analog gauges with the exception of the standby instruments. So it's extremely powerful. It's got 4 Rolls-Royce engines on it that puts out about 20,000 shaft horsepower. I mean, this plane is extremely powerful. And we use a prop aircraft. We don't use a turbojet like you fly around in the airliners. There's a couple of reasons there. Number one, the intense rain and the hail and things like that would affect the fan blades if we were flying an actual jet engine. So the turbo prop gives us 2 things. It gives us instant horsepower because the prop is always spinning at 100% RPM. So whenever I push the power towards max, all I'm doing is changing the blade angle of the prop, which gives me instant lift because it's just blowing right over the wing. Whereas when you're on an airliner and you get on the runway and you hear the pilot get ready to take off and he pushes the power up, there's a spool up time. And it takes a couple of seconds for that turbofan engine to spool up and generate thrust in order to push you forward. But with that prop airplane, it's instantaneous when you're at altitude. I mean, it's pretty hard to stall this thing. If you were to stall off, all you do is just push the power forward and the aircraft recovers marvelously. It's really, I've done it on FCF flights and things like that. It's really incredible. It's a very powerful airplane.
Well, and you have to have that because it's not like flying a commercial flight from one airport to another. You are flying into the heart of the trouble, so you've got to have every advantage possible.
Absolutely. I tell everybody we're flying right into the belly of the beast. I mean, it can't get any worse than this. All military pilots are trained to avoid weather at all costs. And we do while we're en route. But once we make that run into the center of the storm, we're punching right through at 10,000 feet. And we go through by far the most intense weather that Mother Nature has created. It can be one heck of a thrill ride. And then it can also be one of those nail-biting moments where you're like, what am I doing out here at 10,000 feet over the middle of the Atlantic getting the crap kicked out of me?
So I'm glad to know that he actually says that to himself. What the heck am I doing up here?
That's an honest response, I think. And at some point you have to question, did I really make the right career choice? Have you had that thought ever pop in your head? Like, I could be flying transports, but no, I'm here.
I started off flying special operations, and we kind of joke about that. Like, man, there's no way I'd fly in a hurricane. I hear other pilots say it all the time. I'm like, well, it gets beats getting shot at. So there is a trade-off there. But I'm very blessed to be a part of this unit. I've been here for 21 years. I can't see myself doing anything else. I got about 7 or 8 more years before they kick me out. And that'll bring me right up to 40 years of service, and that'll be for my record book. And it's been a blast. I can't say enough about the men and women of the 403rd Wing, the maintainers. It takes an entire team to pull this mission off. It's not just me and the crews on board. It's all 1,500 people at the 403rd Wing at Keesler, and they do a marvelous job. And our maintainers, I can't give them enough credit. My mom is their #1 fan. She loves those guys because they give her baby a safe aircraft to go fly into every time we get in those storms. And, I can't thank them enough.
If you keep Mama happy, you're keeping everybody happy. We have a text on the C Spire text line. says, what must one do to get a ride along? Well, let me tell you the first qualification. I'm going to turn around here and show you where the line starts because I asked for one about a year ago. So the line starts right behind me. I don't know what the rest of the hoops are, but so I still want to do this, Colonel Cross.
We're working it. Well, I think when we get through this COVID stuff, we'll get you on board.
I am ready. All you've got to do is light my phone up. Lieutenant Colonel Sean Cross, always enjoy talking to you. It's fascinating. And do us a favor, stay safe on these flights.
I will,
okay?
Dave. And look, let's check in maybe end of next month or something, see how the season's going.
Hopefully we can have a boring conversation. That would be great, but
so.
It's not the way it's been working the past few years. We appreciate it, Colonel Cross.